What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Huddle Chat Sports Network's very own Fantasy Football Huddle. Today, we're getting right back into those Week 10 stardoms and situms, picking up right where we left off. In part one, we talked about the quarterbacks, tight ends, and the defenses, as well as answering a couple of questions. Today, we're talking about the running backs, wide receivers, and the place kickers, and we got a couple questions to go through as well. So without further ado, man, thank you to Danklyfe, thank you to Let's Talk Sports, thank you to Shank Golf for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, fill up your cup, roll something up, and let's get back into the Week 10 stardoms and situms. Now, if you want to know what's going on with this thing, check out part one. I explained it all. I don't really feel like talking about it much more because we got the running backs to run into right now. Start of the week, running back is going to be Ramondre Stevenson against the Indianapolis Colts in Germany. He put up 22.9 points last week, and Ramondre Stevenson owners are yelling, finally. He's put up single digits in 4 of his last 6 games, and he's really just been disappointing for who we drafted as a potential top 10 running back this season. You're looking at him finally having that good game, and the Colts have allowed 15 or more 7 times to running backs this season. So I like Ramondre Stevenson, and I like having to get up early to watch this game. I'm making some Belgian waffles. I'm drinking some German beer. I don't know what y'all are doing, but Germany's going to be a special time for me tomorrow morning. I'm also going to be starting Javonte Williams against the Buffalo Bills. He's been getting hot as he's been getting healthy. He's got 31.4 points combined in fantasy football over the last 2 weeks. He's a low-end RB2 flex running back against Buffalo, who are allowing 13 plus points 7 times to running backs this season. I'm also going to be starting Jaylen Warren against the Green Bay Packers. I will be starting Najee Harris as well, but if you have Najee on your team, most likely you're going to be starting him. So we don't really need to talk about Najee, but I do like Najee this week. Expect a good game from Najee. But I'm starting Jaylen Warren this week against the Packers. He's gaining a respectable role in this offense. He's been getting a good amount of carries. Even when Najee Harris is having good games, Jaylen Warren is also able to produce. And he's got a positive matchup against the Green Bay Packers, who 11 times this season, or have allowed 11 or more points 6 times this season to running backs. 4 of those running backs putting over 17 points. I also like Brian Robinson Jr. against the Seattle Seahawks. The matchup is tantalizing. Seattle has been generous to running backs, 6th most fantasy points per game to running backs, and 6 touchdowns over the last 4 games. So Brian Robinson, plug him in all formats. I also like Rachaad White versus Tennessee, Aaron Jones versus Pittsburgh, and David Montgomery versus the Chargers. As far as my sitting running backs, I'm going to be sitting Gus Edwards versus Cleveland. I find him to be more of a risk-reward option this week. It's hard to sit him with the 6 touchdowns he scored over the last 3 games. However, Cleveland is one of the elite defenses. They've only allowed 3 touchdowns to running backs, and they have the 4th fewest points per game allowed to running backs this season. Things just aren't looking good for Gus Edwards. You also got Lamar Jackson, Justice Hill, a lot of people in the equation. Stay away from Gus the Bus if you can this week. I'm also staying away from Kareem Hunt. In that same game against Baltimore, he's put up single digits in 3 of his last 4 games. His numbers have been declining. He had 21 snaps only last week, and Baltimore is a tough run defense. 3 touchdowns allowed to running backs all season so far this year. So stay away from Kareem Hunt if you can. I'm also going to probably avoid Jerome Ford if I can do that this week as well. Devin Singletary against the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm going to be sitting him. He failed to meet expectations last week in the absence of Dameon Pierce. He was playing well while vulturing carries from Dameon Pierce. So once he got the number 1 running back duties, you really thought that he was going to be able to do something. Got something to tell you guys, man. The Houston Texans, so far, it's proven to be a wasteland for fantasy football as far as the running back goes. In their backfield, it's going to potentially be a pass-happy game against Cincinnati, so not a good game script. So stay away from Devin Singletary if you can afford it this week. I'm also going to be staying away from Zach Moss, Zach the Pumpkin King. I'm also staying away from Tyjae Spears against Tampa Bay if I can afford it this week. The matchups just aren't good. The usage isn't good at the current moment. I'm going to take more of a wait-and-see approach if I can with those 2. Before we get into the wide receivers, I do have a viewer question to get in. One of my favorite viewers, Jake Rings, he made a trade earlier this week. He was asking me, but unfortunately, I was a little caught up with my sling and everything like that. So he made the trade, and he wants to ask the opinion on it. He traded Kenneth Walker for Tony Pollard and wants to know if that was a big W or a big L. And at the end of the day, I think I was going to tell him to make this trade. I think it's a fantastic trade. Kenneth Walker has been doing great, and it's the exact perfect explanation of buy low, sell high. You're looking at him taking, Kenneth Walker, who's been playing well, even despite having injuries, is one of the top running backs in the league, even though he missed a couple weeks. Tony Pollard has been kind of struggling, not playing terribly, but he's outside the top 24 in standard formats right now. So you're looking at Tony Pollard. He's a buy low right now. I think that his schedule for the remainder of the season is going to be amazing. And when you're looking at on the opposite end of the spectrum, you're looking at Kenneth Walker. Every game he has for the remainder of the season is against a top 10 rushing defense. So I definitely think you had a W in this trade. Nice, smart move for you, Jake Rinks. Thank you for the comment, and thank you for always watching us here at the Huddle Chat Sports Network. So moving on to the pass catchers, we're going to be talking about Brandon Ayuk against the Jaguars. That's my start of the week at wide receiver. He failed to produce more than 11.5 points in 3 of his last 4 games. However, the Jaguars have been awful to perimeter wide receivers. They're allowing the second most fantasy points per game to perimeter wide receivers this season. So I like Brandon Ayuk-ing him right into your lineup. I also like Michael Pittman Jr. against New England. He's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football. Let's just be honest with each other. He's got double digits in all but one game this season. And New England, a good matchup this week, has been generous to perimeter wide receivers. They've got the 4th most fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. So I like MPJ. I'm starting him a lot in every league that I can. I also like Christian Kirk. Now, I know that he came off his worst stat line of the season last week, but keep the faith. The 49ers have been bad against the pass and particularly against slot wide receivers. They've allowed the most fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers over the last 6 weeks. So I like everything that's looking good for Christian Kirk this week. I'm also starting DK Metcalf against the Commanders. He's not been great since his return from the injury. However, the Commanders are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to perimeter wide receivers. So look for a potential bounce back game. This is a get right game for DK Metcalf. I'm also starting DeAndre Hopkins against the Buccaneers. He's been up and down on the roller coaster that's been the 2023 season for the Tennessee Titans, but he's a solid flex starter this week against the Buccaneers. They're allowing the 2nd most points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. I'm also going to be starting Demario Douglas against the Colts, Chris Godwin against the Titans, and Jahan Dotson against the Seahawks. Moving on to my sitting wide receivers, sit of the week, and I hate to do this, Devontae Adams for the Las Vegas Raiders, one of the elite wide receivers in the NFL, has failed to score more than 12 points in 5 straight games. 4 of those games, he's put up single digits. You're looking at the Jets now, his matchup this week, allowing the fewest points per game to perimeter wide receivers. I don't want to start Devontae this week. I can't start Devontae this week if I can afford it. I'm also staying away from George Pickens. It's not a good pick for George Pickens this week against Green Bay. Since the return of Deontay Johnson, the totals have just completely tumbled. They've completely fallen off the cliff for George Pickens. He's a very risk-reward flex. If he doesn't get in the end zone, you're going to be mad that you started him. If he scores a touchdown, you'll be mad that I told you not to start him. And I don't like playing with my money and playing with my emotions like that. So if I have the volume and I have the depth, I'm staying away from that risk-reward flex of George Pickens. I'm also staying away from Zay Flowers against Cleveland this week. He's got single digits in back-to-back games, 2.1 points last week, and it's a bad matchup against Cleveland, 2nd fewest points per game to the wide receiver position. I'm also going to be sitting Gabe Davis against the Denver Broncos, Juju Smith against the Colts, and Christian Watson against the Steelers, as well as Jerry Jeudy against the Buffalo Bills. Finishing this video off talking about the kickers. We're going to blow right through these for you guys. My start of the week at kicker is going to be Matt Gay for the Indianapolis Colts against the New England Patriots. I'm also going to be starting the Seattle Seahawks kicker Jason Myers against the Commanders. I'm also starting Blake Grupe for the Saints at the Vikings, Chase McLaughlin from the Buccaneers at the Titans, and Younghoe Koo for the Falcons at the Arizona Cardinals. My sitting kickers of the week, I'm sitting Jake Moody. I'm going to be sitting Riley Patterson. I'm also sitting Daniel Carlson, Greg Zuerlein, and Will Lutz. So if you have any of those kickers, go ahead and just pick up another one. No need to hold on to them because there's a lot of good kickers out there, including the 5 or 6 I just named for you. That's going to do it for part 2 and the entirety of our week 10 startums and situms. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thank y'all for your loyalty as always. If you like the content, make sure you smash that thumbs up for me and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Make sure don't ever be afraid to ask any questions. And tomorrow, I think I still will be having a live episode, even though the Colts will be playing. I think we're just doing things a little differently tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think I'm just going to be doing a halftime show, kind of giving you a report of what's going on in the first half of that Colts-Patriots game in Germany, and then giving you a quick rundown of the injuries and things like I like to do. It's going to be an even more condensed version, so that way we can get right back in to the second half of that game. That's going to do it for me here today, guys. As always, keep your chins up and your attitudes down. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.